Elliotte, big theme this year for the Devils has been their goaltending and how much that position has struggled. How can and how will they look to upgrade this?
Well, I think, Steve, they have been looking. And, one of the real challenges right now, and I kind of really saw this, the most recent team to really comb through the league was Toronto. And one of the things I've kind of heard from them, and they're trying to be careful about it, is just say, look, like, if you want to get somebody right now, it's really going to cost you. These teams with extra goaltenders or goaltenders to trade, they know that they are in the position of leverage. Sometimes you have the hammer and sometimes you don't. Like, I think one of the things that Toronto tried to do is they tried to offer a late round pick for a goalie, and they just didn't get much out there. Now, I'm looking at this board, and please keep this board up for a second. Let's go left to right. Gibson, most teams are going to have to retain, so you have to pay the price to get the player, and then you have to pay the price to retain. Pat Verbeek is a really tough negotiator, and I've been told that's going to be a really hard deal to do. Markstrom has a no-move clause, so number one, he has to agree to anything. So that's the biggest challenge there. Merzlikins, I definitely think he's available. I think, again, the question is, $5.4 million cap hit. He's struggled at times. What is Columbus willing to do to make this work? But he's definitely available. Allen is definitely available. One more year. Montreal's asked a bigger price. They're one of the teams that they're knowing that they're in the position of strength. Right now, no one's willing to pay what Montreal's willing to do. Kokkonen on the right, he's an interesting one. He's available. He's up after this year. He's an unrestricted free agent. His underlying numbers have been really good on a San Jose team that struggled. I definitely think there's interest in him. Number one, I think the price, like the other goaltenders, is high. Number two, I think the only question on Kakkonen is he's never really been in a position before where he's had to lead a team that's had expectations. And I think that's one of the things that some teams is weighing here is if we do go out and get Kakkonen, who's having a great year, how do they think he's going to handle being a face of a team that wants to contend or wants to win playoff rounds?
It's a fascinating situation to watch, especially when it comes to these Devils who just were such a great story last year. It seemed like a team on the real upswing, but right now, fifth most goals allowed per game this season. You just can't win consistently with that type of goaltending. Meanwhile, they play
and also, Steve, I want to say to you, I don't just think the Devils are looking for goalies. I think they're looking for defensemen.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's just a goaltender thing in New Jersey, although I think they're looking. I've wondered about a guy like Hanifin. I could see them looking at him, and I could see him being the kind of player that they would be eyeing right now.
Yeah, very interesting. It makes a lot of sense. It really does. Meanwhile, on the flip side, I was going to say, the Devils have disappointed. The team they're playing tonight, the Capitals, they've had a surprisingly hot start to the season and starting to now feel like, okay, maybe this is for real. We're a few months into the year. Do you see them as potential buyers now at the trade deadline with this type of success?
I do potentially, but Steve, I still think it's a bit early. I was reminded, if you go back a year ago, the Capitals were in a really good spot, and then John Carlson got hurt, and they kind of got caved in a bit. And I think they remember that. At the beginning of the year, the first week of the season, I was really worried about this team, and I give them a lot of credit. As you said, they found their way. But I think they're going to be patient. I think they're going to wait to see how things develop. But the one thing that's definitely been true, that has been the case for them for a long time now, is they've looked for another top six forward. And that's been going back to the end of last season. So I think if something drops in their laps that they can say, we like this, I think they would do it. Otherwise, I think they're going to wait to see how the next couple weeks or months play out, because they were in a good spot last year until Carlson got hurt, and they're going to be mindful of that, not to make any announcements or decisions too early.
Yeah, and the underlying numbers, they're minus 17 when it comes to goal differential. So there's a part of it that feels like, how are they doing this? But they're doing it. Give them credit. They're doing it right now. Meanwhile, another game tonight, the Leafs taking on the Anaheim Ducks. And for the Maple Leafs, we were talking a little bit about this before you came on. One of the biggest questions for Toronto remains when and if William Nylander signs a contract extension. How do you think that's going to play out, and what do you think at this point is holding it up?
Steve, I think they're working on it right now. I think it's their number one priority, and I wouldn't be surprised if it gets done soon. I think they're going to sign him. I think they're working to sign him. I think, we've been talking about their defense and their goaltending. I think they've decided that William Nylander is their number one priority, and they're working to get that done. Nylander was coy last night. He played great. They played great last night. It was probably their best win of the year, the shutout in LA. I heard you guys talking about it. They went up to him after the game, the reporters, and he had this kind of like smirk on his face, like I'm not talking about it, but it's definitely going on. Like they played yesterday, they played today, so it's not in the forefront. But they have 2 days off between tonight's game and the one in San Jose, and I think they're really going to try to get something done. Now, my compatriot Nick Kyprios, he reported they're talking in the 8 times 11.25 range. I don't know that for sure, but I don't think Nick is off too much, if he's off at all. So I think that they're kind of talking about that kind of range. That's not where Toronto was in the summer. Now they're in that area, and I do think this is going to get done. He's on pace for 117 points. He's earned it.
117 points would tie Daryl Sittler for second most all time in Leafs history. So you said Toronto wasn't there in the summer. You put up a start like that, and maybe that's what forces them to get there. Meanwhile, you mentioned the goaltending situation. Ilya Samsonov placed on waivers a few days ago. What do you think the Leafs do now with that netminder situation?
Well, the one thing is, I believe, Steve, that they think their long-term number one is going to be Joseph Woll, who's injured right now, and he's signed for another year at a great number, under 800,000. And I do think the organization believes in him. He's going to be back probably after the All-Star break. In the interim, Martin Jones, who was their number 3, has really stabilized the team. And I think what they're going to try to do is they're going to try to go with Jones and Dennis Hildeby, and we'll see if Hildeby plays tonight in Anaheim until Woll is healthy. As I mentioned before, they looked around. They did try to see if, I don't think the organization was united, and it was a great idea to bring Hildeby up now, but sometimes you just get forced into situations. They didn't like what else was available. They had to get Samsonov work. He's not even with the AHL team right now. They're playing as we speak. He's working out with their goalie coach, Hannu Tolvanen, and they're working on him on the ice and off the ice, and they just want to see if they can get him back into a better frame of mind. I don't think Matt Murray is an option this year. I just think the injury is going to keep him out. But I think when this is over and Woll is healthy, it's going to be Woll and Jones, and they'll see if there's anything else they decide to do from now to the end of the season.
All right, Elliotte, let's finish with the team they play tonight, the Anaheim Ducks, who, again, will likely be sellers at the deadline. Who do you think will be on the market for this team?
I think the number one guy, well, everyone's talking about Gibson, but as I said before, it's complicated. But I think the number one guy that a lot of teams are looking at is going to be Adam Henrique. Adam Henrique is a center. He's a very good center. He's got experience in very big games. The other thing, too, about him is last year he had a year left on his contract. And, again, it was complicated because a lot of teams didn't have cap room and things like that. And he finally got into a situation now where he's a UFA at the end of the year. And I think the Ducks feel that there's enough interest that they're going to do very well. I haven't heard as much about Silverberg. I've definitely heard a bit about Lyubushkin. The team they're playing tonight that's looking for D, he played in Toronto. They know him well. I think he's one of the players they're looking at. But if there's any player on the Ducks I think is really hot for some teams out there, I think Henrique is the guy.
Ducks started hot, 9-6-0 to start the year, but they've lost 17 of 21 since. Elliotte Friedman, great info as always. Thanks, man.